All right, welcome to the Two Sons Podcast. Happy Wednesday, everybody. We are going to be covering 3 new episodes today. An episode of Andor, an episode of House of the Dragon, an episode of The Rings of Power. All 3 of them will be coming out over the next couple of days. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, I'd really appreciate it if you guys would subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow all of our social media pages. I usually have a link in the description where I put, it just goes to a link tree that has all of our feeds and socials and stuff. We sincerely appreciate you guys supporting the show, and it means a lot to us that you guys subscribe. So Andor, kind of moving on slowly still. We open up with Cassian in his ship with Luthen, and then basically debating his entry into this foray, and he offers to drop him off and then offers an alternative to help him with this big job. And I thought the first thing that stood out to me there is that, one, Cassian is aware of the rebel activity around the galaxy. He specifically mentions Saw Gerrera. Saw Gerrera. He specifically mentions the Alliance, which is the Rebel Alliance, which becomes the largest rebel faction at one point, and the one that actually overthrows the Empire eventually. And he even mentions 2 additional rebel cells in that thing, and then basically strongly hints that I don't believe you guys can do this, so I'm not interested.
Yeah, it's like a battle that cannot be won. Why even start?
Yeah.
And then he proceeded to say, he's like, I've been in battles. And then Luthen's like, well, you're a cook.
Yeah, you were a cook for 18 months, and then you survived because you ran, which was funny because Luthen clearly did his homework before he went to pick up this guy.
That was cool.
Yeah, but then it was weird because then later on he specifically mentioned that he was disposable, which is like this kind of interesting dynamic because it reminds me of Cassian when he kills that guy in the alleyway at the beginning of Rogue One. It's like we're all in this together, that this is that we have this ultimate goal, but at the end of the day, every one of us is expendable at the expense of accomplishing the ultimate goal. It's it's a general rebel philosophy too. And I just finished the episode of from Adalon in season 3 of Rebels, and it's because they're in some trouble because the 7th Fleet shows up over Adalon, and there's a couple of rebel cells there that are getting kind of messed up, and they signal to Mon Mothma for help, and she's like, no, like, we can't afford to ruin the entire rebellion for the sake of 1 or 2 cells. It's kind of like an interesting, like, cutthroat but necessary ideology within the rebellion that I thought was super interesting.
For sure, and I think that was one way for Luthen to help Vel be okay with him just showing up with Cassian.
It's like, you can kill him if he screws up.
If he's terrible, if he's not a good vibe, just slit his throat.
And I also thought it was interesting the general dynamic where, because we meet Mon Mothma finally, and I want to talk a bunch about Mon Mothma because she's one of my favorite characters. And the thing with the Mon Mothma thing is she's clearly helping to fund their operations, but at the same time his operation is geared towards stealing money effectively from the Empire, and he did kind of say like we can only forage so much or something like that in that scene.
That was Vel. Yeah, essentially it seemed like they were kind of just scrounging, right? They don't have that many med packs. They don't have enough pain meds to even give Cassian pain meds when they're cleaning his arm. And then she essentially hinted at the fact that they're eating roots in order to survive out there.
Oh, I missed that part. Wow. Yeah, and it makes sense. Like they're scrounging, and she even seemed bothered that Cassian was going to end up getting paid as a result of this.
Not only that, but 200 bones.
200,000
space bones,
bro. 200,000 space bones. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then the dynamic of this pending mission is super interesting because it seems to me like the actual process of getting in and out of the factory, they seem to be relatively certain that they'll be able to pull it off. It's the TIE fighters that are 9 minutes away that are inevitably going to come in and blast.
That's going to be cool. The wheels are going to fall off.
Oh, for sure.
And it's kind of funny how they're planning. Luthen's like, it's a really well designed plan with people who are kind of like in the know. I can't remember his exact verbiage. And then when they're going over the plan itself, they just have like this little model that one guy had made, and then nothing on the inside. And it's just like kind of like generalized, like, okay, then we're going to exit this
go
little
this
tunnel.
Door. We're going to come out of this door. The guy's like, by the way, it's not to scale.
Yeah. So I mean, we'll see how well executed this plan can be.
I like the little details too, like them talking about the meteor shower that's caused by the planet.
Oh, that's so cool.
The planet in its natural orbit goes into effectively like a debris field.
Yeah.
And this debris like comes into the atmosphere and explodes and basically forms this beautiful shower, but at the same time there's like an eye to that storm that they can like slip in and out of, which is super cool. And it makes sense because then if it closes, then the TIE fighters can't get out, like, and then you're like you kind of buy into the plan,
you buy into the plan cool. And you kind of buy into the magic of Star Wars a little bit.
Oh dude,
like we've talked about how physics in Star Wars is different than physics in our world, and so when they started talking about that, I was very much so okay with it. I thought it was very cool.
I thought this episode very much had this whole series so far to me has the magic of Star Wars. Yes, it's slow. Yes, they're taking forever to set up the storylines and the plot lines and the characters and blah, blah, blah. But like, it feels very Star Wars.
It definitely looks like Star Wars.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, they've done a great job with the detail that they put into making the sets look like Star Wars and the way that people dress. Seeing Coruscant was so incredible, and just seeing the orderly fashion of anything Empire, right?
Dude. We've been exposed heavily through Thrawn, especially the original Thrawn trilogy, and this show, and me rewatching Rebels. I feel like I'm just like getting a whole dose of like Empire, which is really cool because I actually really like again, and this is the like we as kids were primarily exposed to the Sith Lords that were in charge of the Empire and the brute force in the form of the Death Star and the massive fleets and stuff like that. But like we're the kind of fans that would appreciate the intricacies of the way they actually run the damn thing.
Right.
And really it's just like a classic military hierarchy. And in the ISB, I believe that George Lucas's original intention of the ISB was kind of like the SS with the Nazis, because like the SS with the Nazis, from what I'm not a historian, so you guys can write in the comments if I'm like blatantly wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure like one of their primary goals was to root out Jews that were in hiding, and it kind of reminds, the head of the ISB, which I wonder if we'll meet Wolfie Yularen at some point. He has gray hair when he shows up in live action. So I wonder if they could kind of pull off like a recasting or something that looks kind of like him. But essentially, the ISB, he gives a speech, and he's like, "We are a healthcare provider."
That was that was really interesting.
We root out viruses, we root out pathogens. We're looking for sickness, and we're trying to cut it out, which I thought was cool because like. And the whole dynamic in his managerial style when he's dealing with the little squabbles between those two guys, like you're just like, this is cool. Like this is a well-run operation here. I'm not even gonna lie. Like they may be the devil impersonated, but they're definitely. Although I tend to believe that Palpatine's good. Remember?
Oh, I know exactly. Yeah. Hey, everyone, Palpatine is not evil. So we'll make an episode about that someday, where Jason and I can just go to blows about whether or not Palpatine is evil or not. No, I thought so. It was really cool to see the procedure type of the Empire. And that's actually one of the things that we're seeing in the Ascendancy books that we're reading. There's always a procedure to any large military organization that's successful.
Yeah, of course.
So they definitely highlight that. And,
like the concept of standing orders versus given orders, chain of command, all this stuff.
Well, and when you can be involved or not involved, right? Because that was part of the squabble.
Like jurisdiction.
Jurisdiction, yeah. So that was part of the squabble that they had. But they are nailing the Empire, I think.
Oh, dude, it's so good. It just in general I appreciate taking the time to explain stuff like this in this type of dynamic. We're not in a rush here. Like we enjoy having an episode of Andor every Wednesday. It's not like Game of Thrones where every single episode has to be this like slam dunk home run narrative thing. You know what I mean? Like
we don't need a space battle every single episode.
Yeah, exactly. It's all good. And so they send this ISB official out to that security corporation or whatever, and he basically calls them all idiots. I thought it was really interesting that we saw one additional scene there, and it's the primary guy, the gung-ho, overly zealous young officer going to see his mom.
Right. And that was a really interesting encounter because she slaps him in the face and then she gives him a huge hug.
Classic mom.
Classic mom move. Just a classic Coruscant mom. It's very, very typical of those Coruscantians.
Did you pick up anything from? There's one other thing I picked up from that scene. Is there anything you can think of
from that apartment scene where she slaps him?
Yes.
No. What'd you pick up?
So one of the standing like kind of cultural things about Coruscant is you are your wealth is kind of like directly correlated with how high you are off the surface.
Right.
And like, it was kind of interesting to me because like we see the surface of Coruscant.
Right.
And it's clear that is like the utmost high-end wealthy people.
Mon Mothma's apartment
is
it's
dude,
incredible.
Oh yeah, well I want to get to that in a
Okay.
second too, because like the Mon Mothma dynamic is super interesting to me. But like he goes down quite a bit into the Coruscant levels and ends up at a place that seems vaguely middle class. Like it wasn't grungy at all.
No.
Like it was just kind of like, it reminded me of like a decent apartment complex, you know,
That's
kind
what
of
I thought
vibe
too.
And so it's kind of interesting to think like in Coruscant you've got like a literal, like it's kind of like a cool metaphor, or what, I don't even know if I'm using the right word there, but
Symbol?
like a symbolic kind of like gesture of class, of the class structure of Coruscant, where it's like the super rich people are above the surface, the middle class is like some distance below the surface, and then like the poor people are like on the ground,
right,
like in the darkness where there's
incredibly
no light
low.
in it.
Yeah, and it gets worse and worse and worse and worse as it goes down.
Yeah, it's super interesting. So moving on to Mon Mothma.
Yeah. Incredible apartment.
Dude. So as we know, as I learned, rewatching Rebels again, she eventually resigns her post as a senator and becomes essentially the leader of the Rebel Alliance openly. But before that, she's basically a senator
who's playing her part.
Yeah. And, you know, there was a couple things there. First of all, like, she's got money and she's using it to fund the rebellion via Luthen.
Right.
But she's at this point playing the part of the good senator in public. Mm-hmm. But she's starting to feel things squeeze around her. A couple interesting details. You see new senators are showing up in the Senate every day that are effectively spies for the Empire.
Yeah.
Her driver just gets changed on her randomly, which is crazy.
Right.
Like there, it's clear that like they suspect.
Yeah.
But they're like trying to like figure out what she's doing, and the cover that they use where they like, it's like he's this artifact salesman, and like,
I know, wasn't that bizarre?
It was so
he
cool,
changes
though.
in his, I know, I thought it was so interesting. So you kind of get that feel from both Mon Mothma and from Luthen, right? So they're living this double life, and it was so interesting to see him like put on his wig, and he does that weird little gesture thing, and you could tell that it took all of his energy from him.
Yeah.
Because that is totally not who he is.
Oh, of course not.
Right. And he's literally been living this entire life as like an artifact salesman. And can you imagine how freaking draining that would be to do that every single day, to live in Coruscant with all those like stuck up rich people that he hates.
Yeah.
And he's just selling relics of just shit that he doesn't even care about. Oh my gosh, that'd be the worst.
I looked around the room and I couldn't find any. Did you find any I was like, Luke would have been the perfect guy to ask this.
Dude, as soon as that scene ended, I was like, I want to rewatch that so badly. And I looked at the clock and realized I was literally
going to finish
the episode a minute before you got to my house.
Gotcha.
So I'm so bummed because I wanted to look at it so bad, because I'm sure there are relics that are in there. I'm sure of it.
I was looking around and I just cursory glances, and there was like a really interesting like set of armor, almost like a Birdman looking armor in the back
the spikes
of the room.
off the head.
There was some stone tablets that had some like inscriptions and stuff on them, but I didn't see anything that stood out to me as like really significant, at
like
least
a
to
relic
the Force,
of the past.
you know.
Yeah.
Although we do need to talk about one relic, and I do have one other. Well, let's do one other dynamic with Mon Mothma first.
Okay.
Like, I think it's really interesting, and what makes her character so cool, because you know one of the things that I hate about modern society is the demonization of wealth.
Right.
Now, like for the record, like there are rich people out there that are scumbags. There are rich people out there that got their money by being scumbags. There are rich people out there that treat lesser people, or I shouldn't say lesser, people of lesser income, in a derogatory manner. Yeah, I am with you on all of that. But there are also just hardworking people that have earned wealth and that are good people, you know, and that's...
Apparently John Cena has granted the most Make-A-Wish Foundation wishes ever.
Really? That's cool.
Side note.
I'm a John Cena fan. I support it.
John Cena.
Plus, he's got a pet eagle.
Does he really?
No. You haven't heard of The Peacemaker? That's his new show on HBO.
Of course I don't watch it.
Does he really?
You could do that?
Is that a thing?
All right.
Just fishing net in Alaska. Just
and they're like, who has it? John Cena? Just he can keep it. It's fine.
I don't want to take it away from John Cena. I don't know about you.
Sorry. Anyways, you can be wealthy and not be a bad person.
Exactly. And what I liked about that is like she's got all this wealth, she's got all this power. I mean, at least locally on Chandrila. But like she's not happy, and more importantly, she sees the things that the Empire is doing and actively is trying to fight against it. I think it was a really interesting concept because, like, I think that it's important to understand that one of the main reasons why uprisings are difficult is that there isn't enough funding behind it. There isn't enough power behind it. It's the common folk are led to believe that they are powerless. Yeah. You know, and then it keeps them kind of underneath the thumb. You know?
And they're untrained. For example, we meet the rebel cell and the kid who's sleeping on the rock, I forget his name, the way he's holding his gun just exudes not being trained.
Like amateur.
Yeah, totally amateur. The fact that they, aren't supplied like we had talked about earlier, just complete amateur. It was kind of funny too because they did a little shout out to modern day rebels around the world, and their blasters were eerily similar to AK-47s.
Oh yeah, I thought the same thing, and they did that in Rogue One too, if you remember.
Oh really? I didn't notice that. Yeah, so I thought that was a really cool or intriguing aspect, and again, just they are nailing the details with this show. Yeah,
that's a pretty consistent theme that Disney's done with the rebel concept. Is just regardless of the ideologies and whether or not you agree with them, but that's a real thing that happens around the world in various capacities, and I kind of like that personification of that within Rebels. I think it's an interesting concept.
Right. We were breaking down Mon Mothma though. What do you think her ultimate relationship is with her husband? Because later on in Star Wars universe, we don't see him ever.
Yeah.
Do you think they end up splitting in this show? I would guess yes. That's going to be a kind of a crazy predicament that really doesn't even matter or have huge bearing on the entire galaxy itself. But I would think that we see a dynamic of their relationship because they highlighted it just a little bit, and I would think that they split. That was her husband, right?
Yeah, I picked up strong like he likes being the rich guy vibe.
Yeah, exactly.
And
she doesn't care.
There will eventually come a point in their relationship where Mon Mothma's endeavors, her clandestine endeavors, will result in his lifestyle being disrupted.
Right.
And then he's going to become a threat.
Yeah.
That's my guess.
I think that's a really good guess. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I want to save my ricotta thing for the end. So was there anything else on your notes that you wanted to do in this episode?
The dynamic. So Luthen seems like a complete hard ass that's pretty cutthroat, but at the end of the day, I don't think he is. I think to be a rebel, you have to be willing to sacrifice, you have to be willing to die. And the one scene that really intrigued me was the kyber crystal scene. When he has this kyber crystal that's super valuable to him, he didn't know like where he was going to be or what his future was, so he gives it to Cassian. And he's like, hey, this is worth a lot, I want it back. But if I don't, it's worth about $50,000.
Yeah, like if I die, you can get it for about $50,000, but it'll always be worth way more to me.
Yeah.
So he mentions that it was a relic of the Rakatan uprising. And so you may know some about the Rakata.
No.
But they were an ancient race of aliens, like we're talking like 30,000+ years before the Battle of Yavin, from the planet Lihan, which makes an appearance in the I believe it's in the Bane series. I want to say Lihan is where that Sith Lord with the animals that are combined with cybernetics.
Oh, I remember those.
I think that was Lihan. I could be wrong about that, but anyway, the Rakatan were a alien race that was highly sensitive to the Force, and as a society completely turned to the dark side. And they built all of their technologies on the power of the Force. They invented hyperspace travel, and they were effectively the first galactic empire, and it was the first time that the dark side of the Force actually controlled the galaxy. They built something called the Starforge, which was basically a Force-powered shipyard machine that created ships incredibly rapidly. Their hyperspace technology was fueled by the Force. They were an incredibly advanced Force race that took over the galaxy. But they were so corrupted by the dark side of the Force that they essentially only existed to conquer. They conquered races. They enslaved races. They destroyed planets and terraformed them to fit their needs.
Very
they
Grisc-like,
They
it
were
sounds.
exactly. And what ends up happening is eventually, according to Star Wars Legends, one of the alien races that they subjugated ends up coming up with a virus that only infects the Rakatan. And what it does is it kills the vast majority of them, and then the rest of them leaves them insensitive to the Force.
Wow.
And then they slowly but surely get, kicked out of all of the areas of space. So essentially there's a rebellion, an uprising.
Yeah.
And so it's basically the first galactic empire and the first rebellion that overthrows it.
Wow.
And so I thought it was really cool that Kyber crystal effectively is the symbol to Luthen that this can be done.
I see.
Because the Rakatan Empire was so, domineering and so powerful, yet they were subjugated from the inside with cunning and it was. I thought it was a really cool symbol. And then obviously anytime you see Kyber crystal, you're like, lightsabers. Kyber.
So what was it? Well, so according to your lore, Star Wars lore, it's odd to me that Kyber crystal was blue instead of red.
Well, it was also blue mixed with white.
Yeah, it was blue mixed with white. Yeah, but any dark side Kyber crystal typically is red, because it's been essentially purged, correct?
From what I understand, and there were brief interactions between the Rakatan Empire, or what they called the Infinite Empire is what they called it. But there was a few interactions between the Rakata and the Jedi, or whatever, before they, I don't know, spruced up their name a little bit, and the Sith, the actual Sith species
Mainstreamed their name
on Korriban.
Yeah.
But from what I understand, that was back when they were using swords and stuff. So
that's so cool.
So I think the Kyber crystal was more either like some sort of popular,
energy source
substance, or it could have been like what Kyber was used for in the lightsaber and everything. It focuses energy really well, so it could have been used for a million different things. And it was clearly much larger than a lightsaber crystal.
Right.
It had the two colors thing. It had some symbols etched on it. So I think it had, maybe not on the symbols, but the point is like I just thought it was a cool symbolism.
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting when he said its value is $50,000, but it's worth much more to me. To me, it's Luthen's symbol of hope. It's basically his symbol of like, this can be done. You know what I mean?
That's an incredibly good pickup and a good way to end it.
All right, guys, that is all we have for today. As always, we sincerely appreciate your support. Keep your eye on the next couple of days. We will have episodes on House of the Dragon and Rings of Power coming out.
Thanks a lot.